In this video, we are exploring the perspective of cognitive psychologists on why there are sex differences in spatial navigation. Before we dive in, what is cognitive psychology to begin with, and what types of questions do cognitive psychologists ask? Cognitive psychology is concerned with how the mind works. Cognitive psychologists ask questions like, how do people pay attention to and perceive the external world? How do people remember and learn things? And how do people reason and make decisions? In general, cognitive psychologists ask how the human mind processes information and acts on it. Researchers test theories about how the mind works by deriving hypotheses or predictions and testing them in experiments. In the 1940s, a pioneer in cognitive psychology, Dr. Edward Tolman, conducted seminal studies on spatial learning with rats. His studies emphasized the importance of spatial representations in the mind. Tolman and his colleagues trained rats to find food by following a roundabout path from A to G. After rats learned to run from A to G without hesitation, the apparatus was changed to a sunburst maze. The starting path from A to B remained, but a series of radiating paths was added. The rats again started at A and ran across the circular table into the alley to B, but found the well-known path blocked. Then they returned onto the table and began to explore the radiating paths briefly before running all the way out onto one of the other radiating paths. Notably, the path that most rats chose was number 6, which led directly to the location of the food in the original maze. Thus, Tolman suggested that the rats knew where the food was in space. This view was influential because many researchers at the time believed that rats' behaviors, as well as humans' behaviors, only depended on simple stimulus-response pairs. According to the standard view at the time, rats could only get to the food by following the stimuli triggering their actions on the route that they had initially learned. The ability to find a novel route really challenged the researchers about stimulus-response theory. On the basis of this research, Tolman coined the term cognitive map, which refers to the internal representation of spatial knowledge stored in one's mind. Built upon these intriguing findings in rats, an important question for cognitive psychologists is how humans acquire and utilize spatial knowledge. More generally, cognitive psychologists are interested in what types of spatial knowledge people acquire from different types of navigation experience, and what types of knowledge they use when they navigate. Cognitive psychologists might also ask how people perceive and pay attention to different types of spatial information, like signs on a street or landmarks in a city, and how people remember the spatial layout of information to construct a cognitive map. They also want to understand how people update their locations as they navigate, based on multisensory information, including vision, audition, and perception of their own motion through space. Cognitive psychologists also study the different strategies that people use to choose routes to goal locations. In this video, we focus on human sex differences in spatial navigation. To study sex differences, cognitive psychologists conduct experiments in both real and virtual environments and infer participants' spatial knowledge, navigation ability, or strategies using different behavioral measurements. For instance, researchers might track participants' trajectories when they navigate to a goal location to see if they take the shortest route. Another way to measure participants' performance is recording errors when people point to the direction of a non-visible landmark. In this case, researchers measure angular error, which is the difference in the angle between the direction they pointed and the true direction to the landmark. Researchers can also ask participants to sketch a map of the environment and compare the accuracy of their sketch map to an actual map of the environment. Although men show better performance than females on average in some of these tasks, superior performance by men is not found in all tasks. For example, an advantage in favor of men is typical when people learn the spatial layout from direct experience, but not when they learn from maps. This sex difference is also more pronounced in measures of survey knowledge, an ability to form a layout of the whole environment, than it is in measures of route knowledge, an ability to retrace a learned route. Another interesting difference is that females and males use different environmental cues and strategies during navigation and orientation. Females typically report navigating on the basis of local landmarks and familiar routes, whereas males report using cardinal directions, environmental geometry, and metric distances. An experimental method called the dual solutions paradigm has been used by researchers to study sex differences in human navigation strategy. In this experimental paradigm, participants learn a virtual maze environment with 12 objects by walking in a maze environment on a fixed route without access to the map or an overhead view of the environments. After they follow the route 5 times, they do 20 test trials. On each test trial, they are transported to one object and asked to navigate to another object in the maze. Note that there are no specific instructions about whether to follow the learned route or to take the shortest path. Participants are just told to navigate to the object. By tracking participants' trajectories, researchers can find whether people prefer to take a novel shortcut, known as the place strategy, or prefer to take the route they learned before, known as the route or response strategy. Results show a spectrum of individual differences in strategies. Some people always take a shortcut to the environment, others always take the route they had learned, and many are in between those extremes, using a mixture of both strategies. On average, women are more likely to take the learned route than men. However, when researchers changed the instructions and asked participants to take a shortcut to the goal, women took more shortcuts, although the sex difference did not disappear completely. This result suggests that in some situations, women are able to take shortcuts, but they just choose not to do it. Given these phenomena, cognitive psychologists are interested in investigating the causal factors explaining these sex differences. In short, what causes these differences? It could be that because women are less able to perform metrically precise survey knowledge. For example, it has been shown that different parts of the brain support different navigational behaviors. Specifically, the hippocampus is more related to taking shortcuts in an environment, but the caudate nucleus is more related to falling back on a well-learned route. The hippocampus is more activated by men than women during navigation in neuroimaging tasks, but this conclusion is controversial and is not replicated in every study. Second, it could be that because many studies are being conducted in virtual environments and men have more familiarity with virtual environments of this type because they have more video game experience than women. However, even some studies that controlled for video game experience found that men on average take more shortcuts than women. Finally, it could be that women are less likely to take risks and not take shortcuts, so they prefer to stick to the route they know. There is some evidence that women on average experience more anxiety during navigation than men, and this might cause the differences in risk-taking. These competing hypotheses can be tested in other experiments. For example, experimenters could test participants' navigational behaviors in an immersive virtual environment or in the real world without involving a video game type of controller, or monitor participants' anxiety levels to observe if anxiety is related to strategy choice. Although this video does not give an exhaustive list of possible causal factors influencing people's navigation behaviors, it illustrates how cognitive psychologists use different tasks to test people's navigation abilities and strategies. A spectrum of individual differences and sex differences exist in navigation ability and strategy. Different possible explanations call for interdisciplinary studies in spatial navigation. For example, how does the type of environment people live in shape their navigation ability and strategy? How do hormones influence the functions of brain areas involved in navigation, such as the hippocampus? Can evolutionary anthropology theories explain why different strategies are adaptive for men and women? This interdisciplinary thinking can help researchers understand spatial navigation and provide suggestions on how to design a user-friendly environment or GPS app, how to prevent cognitive-related brain diseases, and in general, how to live a more convenient life. Thanks for watching and joining me. If you have any questions or would like to reach out, please be in touch. Thanks, and bye for now.